morning, everyone, and welcome to Grassroots Strategic Planning, a non-traditional approach with our presenter. We're really excited about having our presenter today, Orson Aguilar, who's Senior Director of Affairs at Opportune. And he's an organization strategist and social justice advocate. And many of you will know him as the past president of the Greenlining Institute. So we are very excited. So we're going to go through our preliminaries quickly so that we can get right on with this session. Okay, so before you start, we want you to please make sure that your Zoom name is your first name and your last name and your organization name, so that we can make sure and have all of your information. If we have any follow-up that we can give, then we want to make sure that you are, that we have you, we can contact you. So the way you do that is you hover over your video, you click the three dots in the upper right corner, you click rename, and then change it to your first name, your last name, and the name of your organization. We would really appreciate that. So we will make sure that if our presenter gives us permission, that we will provide you with presentation slides, which will be on the website. If you did not pre-register for this event or just are joining us today, just make sure that you drop your email in the chat so that we will know that we have all of your contact information to be able to give you those materials that may be available. So just to reintroduce you to the team, Dr. David Franklin is President and CEO of Occur. Dr. Franklin will be joining us in and out. He's multitasking this morning, but has already been here with us, and he will be joining us. I'm Carmen Bogan. I'm the lead consultant for Faiths and have been for many years. I am the president and founder of the Bogan Group, a consulting group. Michelle Miles Chambers is the director of Faiths. I haven't seen Mickey today. I don't know if she's here, but hopefully she will unmute herself if she is and say hi to all of us. Saran Stokes is her illustrious program assistant. I've had the great fortune of working with Saran. She is amazing. And speaking of amazing is Shai Alderman, who is the operations manager of Occur. You will be hearing from Shai. And then Simone Stokes, who's the administrative assistant with Occur. And each month we have many other people who help us to bring this to you. And so even if we haven't mentioned your name and you're a part of the team, such as Sandra Alexander, who keeps disappearing from this Model Built on Faith program team slide, but Sandra's here as well. And so welcome everybody. And I see a lot of familiar faces in our gallery. Welcome to you. It's always good to see you. I'm looking at Lynette Lee. I love seeing Lynette Lee. Thank you, Lynette, for waving. Lynette waves and she puts her picture up there, and I always love seeing Lynette. So hi, Lynette, how you doing? Next slide, please. So I have the really great privilege of introducing our good friend, Orson Aguilar. Orson looks like a 20-year-old, but we have known Orson for many, many years. He and David Glover were great friends and worked together in being not only strategists in the organizations that they were leading, but also social justice advocates together. He's the past president of the Greenlining Institute, and you all are familiar with the Greenlining Institute, the great work it's done in the past and the work it continues to do. And a lot of that has to do with the trailblazer that was in for many years and working with the community in various capacities, and that would be Orson Aguilar. And I just want to tell you a little bit about him because in Oakland, we tend to put our arms around people, claim them as our own, and don't always understand that that folks like, excuse me, folks like Orson are busy, present, and known across the country and many times across the world. He's one of those people. So let me just tell you a little bit about Orson. Orson is a nationally recognized leader on issues related to economic justice and wealth building for communities of color. Orson has been advocating for racial equity policies focused on creating economic opportunities for communities of color for over 20 years. Under his leadership of the Green Lining Institute, the organization shepherded some of the nation's leading policies on racial equity, climate change, and economic justice. Orson has led and participated in several nonprofit strategic planning processes, many of which led to game-changing results related to impact and funding. Orson has testified in Congress and has facilitated numerous meetings with federal regulatory leaders and corporate CEOs on matters related to diversity, consumer finance, and economic development. He has been quoted in numerous newspapers, including the Washington Post, the New York Times, the Los Angeles Times, USA Today, and the American Banker. He serves on several governing boards, including the East Los Angeles Community Corporation and Innovative Public Schools. He has also received numerous leadership appointments, including the Federal Reserve of San Francisco's Community Advisory Council, Bank of America's National Community Advisory Council, BBVA's Community Advisory Council, and PG&E's Community Advisory Council. Congresswoman Barbara Lee honored Orson in 2019, very recently, with a Congressional Record Award. And Oakland's mayor made April 26, 2019, Orson Aguilar Day. Orson is currently the Senior Director of Public Affairs with Opportune, a mission-driven financial technology company that provides inclusive financial services for hardworking Americans. Orson lives in Southern California with his wife and their 3 children. Please join me in welcoming Orson Aguilar. Before Orson begins, I just want to give you sort of a prelude to what Orson's going to talk about. And he has given me permission to do this. But strategic planning has always been kind of mysterious for a lot of people. And one of the reasons it tends to be mysterious is because it's expensive. Most organizations who are doing grassroots work simply cannot afford to hire a high-level strategist to do strategic planning in their organization. So what happens? That step is skipped over for our organizations, and as a result, there's no formal strategy. That is unfortunate, and so we're going to address that today. Orson's going to not only teach on how strategic planning is traditionally done so that you can pick up some of that, but Orson's also going to be discussing something that he and I have talked about a lot, and that's doing a strategic planning hack. A strategic planning hack is to look at another way that this can be done so that it is more relevant for community-based organizations, faith-based organizations, and other. It's something that you can do with your own team. What I want you to do as Orson presents is to raise your hand, ask questions. This is going to be interactive because we want to make sure that you are taking away a new skill, not just a recording from a session, that you actually got it. And so if there's anything that you don't understand or anything that you would like Orson to explain in a different way, just raise your hand, unmute yourself, and hey, let's go for it. We're going to start with a poll to give Orson a really good indicator of where you are with the strategic planning process. Shai, do you have the poll? Okay, let's do it. First question, does your organization have a strategic plan? So I'd like all of you to just click on yes or no. You've done the polls before, so your answers are going to be really important for us to get, because we need to know what level we should be presenting at. So let us know. Do you have a strategic plan? Okay. Next question. Do you find your strategic plan to be relevant to your work? So your choices here are that you don't have a strategic plan, that you have one and you don't consider it to be necessarily relevant to your work. And when we say relevant, we mean, is it impacting the people that it needs to impact? Can you follow it as a roadmap? Is it relevant to the work that you're doing? Do you look at it and actually use it? And the third answer is you have one, but you don't find it useful. It's not relevant to the work that you do. Sometimes a strategic plan was done a long time ago. And so are you still able to follow it? Does it still make sense to you? Okay. Question number 3, does your team understand your strategic plan? Is it just something that the board understands? The executive director understands? So first, don't have one. Second answer, have one and the team understands it. Third answer, have one, but the team doesn't quite understand it. Question number 4, check all the statements that apply to your organization. We're too busy to create a strategic plan. We don't feel that we need a strategic plan. We can't afford to hire someone to help us with a strategic plan. We don't need a strategic plan for what we do. Or the process is way too confusing to even bother ourselves with it. So anyway, so then submit your answers. And Shai, can you give us some indication of where we were with our participants today?
Yeah, a little bit less than half. About half of everybody has answered. So let's give it maybe another minute.
That's okay. So what were the answers for number 1?
For number 1, we're looking pretty 50-50 with yes and no.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can you read the question again and then tell us? Okay.
Yeah. So number 1 is, does your organization have a strategic plan? And more people are saying no than yes, but it's pretty split.
Okay.
And then for number 2, do you find your strategic plan relevant to your work? 56% said that they don't have one. 33% said that they do have one and it's relevant to their work. And then about 16% have one, but they don't find it useful or relevant to the work that they do. And then number 3, does your team understand your strategic plan? About 53% says that they don't have one. And 21% said that they have one and their team understands it. And 26% said that they have one, but their team does not understand it. And then lastly, number 4, check all the statements that apply to your organization. So about a quarter of the people said that they're too busy to create a strategic plan. About 16% said that they don't feel that they need a strategic plan. 32% they can't afford to hire someone to help with a strategic plan. And nobody thinks that they don't need a strategic plan.
Okay.
About 26% think that the process is too confusing.
Okay. So Orson, your
Should I go ahead and end the poll?
That's I'm sorry. Okay. So thank you. Thank you,
I'm
Shai.
gonna go ahead and end the poll.
Okay. Yes, you can end the poll. And Orson, you see the path ahead of you.
All righty.
And so with no further ado, we're just going to toss it on to you.
Well,
Thank
good
you.
morning,
Thank you, Shai.
everybody. I hope everybody's doing well. Carmen, thank you for those really kind remarks. And it's just really great to be with all of you, joining you from really hot Southern California. And let me just say, I'm really missing the Bay Area for many things, but in particular, the fact that it's probably not going to be 96
The weather.
in Oakland, where I lived. I lived in Oakland I'm originally from East LA, Boyle Heights, but eventually got a job at the Green Lining Institute when we were in San Francisco. That's where I met the great and the late David Glover, who was with Occur for many, many years and who was my mentor and somebody who I still think a lot about. So it's great to be with the company of Occur. Also great to be with the San Francisco Foundation, who was a great supporter of ours, and I would say of mine when I was at the Green Lining Institute. And it's great to be back with folks in the Bay. I had to say Oakland was really good to me. I had a great time there. My kids were all born in Oakland. We lived in the Fruitvale for over about 20 years. And it was just time for me to come back home to LA. So that's why I'm here. I was thinking about the polls, and we probably had around 20 people participate. But I would say if we had 1,000 nonprofit leaders participate and faith leaders participate, we probably would get very similar findings. Carmen, we should think about that. Should be a blog or something of what we found, because I bet that is very representative of folks in the nonprofit sector. And it doesn't surprise me for many reasons. So a little bit of background, I've been in the nonprofit sector nearly all my life. I've been in corporate America for 2 years, where I've been able to see strategic planning in a whole different way. And I'd say in my life at Green Lining, I went through, I saw all the answers and I was there, right? I was at one point saying, well, why do we really need a strategic plan? From saying we really need one, and then going through a strategic plan, and then finding that staff didn't find it that relevant because we didn't champion it, or because we didn't train them, or because we didn't update it. All those things are true and things I've seen. I've gone through a number of processes where I've been part of strategic planning processes where it worked out really well. And I've been part of many where we hired consultants, some of the best consultants, got a long plan that nobody understood. And then guess what? It just kind of, as they say, it sat on the shelf and it collected dust. But now that I'm, looking back at all my time, especially seeing how a company, so Opportune is a publicly traded company on the NASDAQ. And whenever you have a publicly traded company, let me just say the stakes are high, because if you don't deliver, people will lose their jobs, right? We literally had one of our investors published a blog talking about how our CEO should probably not have his job because he hasn't done enough to raise the stock price. Well, guess what happened? Within 2 months, there was major action at the company, and now the stock price is edging up. Had that not happened, who knows what the board of directors, what the investors would decide. So I'm just honored to be with you all. As Carmen said, this is very informal. You can raise your hand, you can jump in the chat. Shai, if you can help me kind of monitor the chat and see. But I'm happy to pause at any time and, just kind of go through this. Shai, should I share my screen now? Or
Yeah, go for it.
all right, so let me just put it in. Okay, how's that looking, Shai, on your end? You're muted, Shai.
Click presenter view on the top left. It's in the, we can see your whole screen with the
Center view. That would
two to
be,
the right.
I think I have all my windows are blocking.
It's in the left top corner, but it's the third icon over.
There we go. Okay, looking good.
Not doing the full screen. I apologize. Maybe go back.
Why don't you play
How's that?
from the beginning? That's good.
All
Let's
right.
start with that. Okay.
Sounds good. So why do we need a strategic plan in the first place, right? That's, I think, just reflecting on some of the answers and some of the work we do, and especially, I imagine nearly all of you are in the community doing very important grassroots work. And when you're doing that work, it means you're very responsive to what's happening, right? You're responsive to your constituents, to what's happened, to a crisis, to an opportunity, to a celebration. And so when you're a responsive organization, it sometimes makes it hard to plan. And we had that problem for many years at the Greenlighting Institute, where we said, we're advocates. If we see an opportunity, if there's an injustice, if there's a corporation that's done something wrong, we're going to jump all over them and hold them accountable, make them come to the community, explain what they're doing. And so we were a very responsive organization that was kind of, you could say, was going from fight to fight to fight. And so I would say that our founders didn't believe in a strategic plan because they had it in their head. They knew what they were doing. The problem was most of us were trying to guess where they were going, right? Like we enjoyed the fight, we enjoyed the advocacy, working in community, but we didn't have the big picture in our head. We didn't have a roadmap. And I imagine that's still very relevant today, where we have a lot of amazing nonprofit leaders, faith leaders that have just a great vision, great talent for what they do. And, they assume that the rest of us will just follow, that we will just kind of pick it up somehow. And it sometimes doesn't work that way. Sometimes you need to have a plan that's written. And when you don't have a plan, sometimes you have some problems. I'll start there, right? When you don't have a plan, you have a lack of alignment. So you have people going in different directions, as they say, people rowing the boat in different directions. You have a lot of meetings with a lot of wasted time. I wish I could see some hands go up, but who feels like they're in a lot of meetings and that the meetings are unstructured and there's perhaps not a purpose to the meeting, that the meeting was called, but whoever called the meeting didn't have a good objective and what goal was. But I found myself doing that a lot in my 20 years, a lot of meetings, which means it's taking you away from the actual work that needs to be done out in the community. And when you don't have a plan, you miss opportunities. There could be great opportunities for fundraising, for advocacy, to really make a difference for your community. But because you're in a lot of wasted meetings, because people are not aligned, you will miss some really good opportunities to make your organization grow and be more effective. And as they say, the organization loses the forest for the trees. So you're very focused on that one tree or that one shrub, and you forget, that there's an entire forest out there. So when you have a good strategic plan and you implement, and that's the key word that we'll talk about later, implementation of the strategic plan, you're going to see some great things. You're going to see some strong teamwork and alignment. You're going to see more efficient use of your time. You're going to see happier staff, where everybody feels valued, where everybody feels like they are part of the solution because they also have a part in the strategic plan, and they're also held accountable to it. At the end of the day, if you have a good strategic plan, you're going to have you know, I see most of you in one way or another serve either individuals or families or communities, but you know, community starts with the individual level or the family level. You're going to have more impact. So we'll get into that. And again, if there's any questions, if you want to stop me along the way, please do.
One of the things that I would like to add, Orson, is that funders are looking for some kind of plan as well. And they call those plans different kinds of things. What are some of the names that you can think of that they call what we would call a strategic plan? Your theory of change. You know, that they funders typically have their own lingo. But if you have a strategic plan and you are asked for a theory of change, then you can look at a summary of the strategic plan that you have put together, and that will many times suffice for your theory of change. Okay, so someone is asking a question, Orson. I think it's Alicia Contreras. Unmute yourself, Alicia.
Very good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you so much for inviting us. You know, I think that I want to ask a following question in regards to what you just mentioned. I mean, I have seen, yes, many times funders want us to have a strategic planning. However, for us to find funding to pay for the strategic planning is not that easy. So I'm very curious, you know, with all the people in the room, I'm hoping the experience for everybody is different. But when I've been looking for that kind of funding, I have not found a funder who wants to fund that.
I think Orson's going to be very, very happy that you asked that question, because that is exactly what he's going to be presenting on. So I will step out, Orson, and let you get back.
Yeah, I would say I do touch on that later. I do, you know, in my experience, and maybe the landscape has changed, and it depends on what type of budget you have, which we kind of touch on. But oftentimes some funders, they do want to fund a strategic plan. You know, I think maybe some funders might be hesitant because they might feel like if they fund a strategic plan, well, then they're on the hook for, you know, what you say your big bold, you know, goals are going to be. But I would say keep looking, because as I look at the funders out there, they all really care about capacity building, right? Maybe we're tired of that word, capacity building, but capacity building starts with having a good strategic plan. But one of the things I'm going to get into is, you know, maybe you don't need that fancy consultant, because as you know, some of the points I will make is sometimes nonprofits make the mistake of giving too much kind of power over to the consultant, and then the consultant kind of ends up owning it. And then the staff gets something back that they don't really understand. So there's pros and cons to consultant. Clearly, if you can afford one, I would definitely always take the money and use it. But just be, you know, just remember, the consultant doesn't provide the answers for you. They are merely a facilitator. And I've seen good consultants draw up some really great strategic plans, and then I've seen some consultants do some strategic plans that I read and then I can't make sense out of them. I still ask, you know, I read it and then I say, so what do you do? You shouldn't have to ask what do you do after you read someone's strategic plan, but I'll get some to it. But that's a really good point. Did you have a follow-up, Alicia?
I just want to add one more thing, because when I talk about funding, one thing that also I think has to be put in the equation of funding is the time that we need to pay to the staff for all the time that is spent in the planning, which is not something that is integrated. And for me, in other organizations, the stressful part has been always, this grant is paying for time directly in the program. And it's not easy for me to find that flexibility in the funding to pay for, including my time. I mean, like the ED's time. Who wants to pay for the ED's time to spend a lot of time planning?
Great point. And as we go through the presentation, we are going to see that it could be a lot of time, or it doesn't. But that's and I think it also depends on the models, right? If you're a direct service organization where your frontline people are meeting with clients, you can't just take those a half a day to do a retreat or a 2 hours. So I totally get that, and I think that's something that funders really need to be sympathetic about, because in some ways it kind of is extra work depending on your funding model and the kind of program, services, and delivery that you provide. As Carmen said, a good strategic plan makes everything easier, especially fundraising and proposal writing easier. I remember writing a lot of proposals, and the funder says, "So what's your theory of change?" Or really, funders always want to know, what are your goals and what are your objectives? And it was very rare that I could just go to a document and cut and paste and say, here are goals and objectives, because we worked on these. And then a funder will ask you, this was the most stressful part early in my career. They say, well, what are your metrics of success, right? Or how do you measure success? And then I remember just running around crazy, like, how do we measure success around here, right? And had I had a strategic plan that had goals and objectives with metrics of success, you're always going to have to modify them a little bit, but it would have been such a huge kind of start. And I remember just thinking, this is daunting. And again, it doesn't have to be that daunting with some of the hacks and some of the shortcuts we propose. But again, this is never easy, and it always takes time. And the best thing I've learned from strategic planning, which I'll get to later, is a strategic plan is never set in stone. It is a living, breathing document. You can revise, you can delete. The important thing is to always have goals and objectives for yourselves, and we're going to get into that.
Right. One of the things I want to say, Orson, to kind of punctuate that is one of the reasons that I have emphasized over time that master proposal. Even though people don't ask for a master proposal anymore, it is really important to have written one that has all of that information in it. It is not a strategic plan, but for some organizations, it's as close as they are able to get without going through the formal strategic planning process. So just wanted to emphasize that connection as well.
Definitely.
Okay, thank you.
So here's some, and this is where you're going to see it could take up a lot of time. And I've been part of processes where it takes up a year, and who knows how many staff hours, and who knows, like, had we quantified how much we paid in terms of staff time, it would have been a lot, right? But the common elements is hire a consultant, right? And we'll get to that a little later. Engage key stakeholders, right? You want to make sure that we are listening, right? We are the grassroots organizations. We are in the community. It's up to us to listen, not just to our staff, not just to our board, but the people we serve, our funders, everybody who has a touch point with the organization. How are you going to get some data, whether it's through surveys, through a town hall? We'll get some of that. We'll get to some of that. You got to visualize. I love this exercise of visualizing what success looks like. And I'll touch on that a little bit. Many of you have probably in your lives conducted a SWOT analysis, or at Greenlining and others, we'd like to call it a TOES analysis. We didn't kind of like the militaristic term of a SWOT, kind of like the toes better. Sometimes organizations review the mission and vision, which in itself could be a very daunting task, and we'll get into that. For me, the crux of a strategic plan, the pillar, is developing the goals and objectives, which you can do with it, with shortcuts to all of the above, and we're going to spend a lot of time on that. Sometimes you want to write and publish the plan. I would tell folks, if you're going to publish something, maybe publish your story or publish your annual report, because one, publishing takes a lot of time, and as you've heard me say, the strategic plan can shift, it can be revised. So you might not want to publish a plan that's going to be shifting every 3 months or every year. So maybe there's but if you have the money and you really are proud of it, and again, publishing could be a very simple Word document, something that you can hand to a funder, etc. You want to send to your key stakeholders your plan. That's usually, it depends, but a lot of strategic plans now are very funder focused. That is a good thing, but it's also a bad thing, right? We should also want to envision, the fact that we want folks in our community, the people we serve, to ideally be able to read a version of our plan and understand what we do and get motivated and be a supporter of our plan. And then lastly, you want to develop the systems to implement the plan. And I would say of all my years doing nonprofit work, this is the one gets dropped the most. You'll go through all of these steps that I've described, but then usually the consultant, if you have one, will go away because you're not paying the consultant to develop your system or to help you drive the system. And that's when it gets really hard. It gets really hard because we get busy or because we didn't buy in, all of the above. So we're going to get into some of that. Any questions before I move forward?
Kristen, I have a question. So when you say systems for moving forward, can you just give a few words on that so that folks will understand what you mean by the systems?
So I am going to get to that one. So can we put that one in I don't know what you call it now. Let's put that one on the bike rack.
Okay.
Can you remind me to come
The
back?
playground, the
The
playground.
playground, that's better.
Okay.
So we touched on this a little bit, the consultant, right? The one, I'm going to say there's a lot of really good consultants out there these days, folks that have done really well running nonprofits, had a lot of success, and for some reason or another, they left the nonprofit sector, and they're consulting now, and so maybe they're doing it for part-time while they kind of reboot and refresh. Some of them will do it forever, but you have some and you have the individuals, you have the firms. We usually went with the individuals because they tend to be more cost effective versus a firm where you're paying overhead. There are a lot of good individuals that have great grassroots experience out there. Now, I don't know, Carmen, if you provide a list of folks, but I just remember meeting so many great folks in the Bay Area that did strategic planning. Again, the ranges depends how big you are. I've seen some strategic planning go above 25,000. So that all depends on the size of your budget. But I've seen some as low as 2,000 and maybe even lower, depending on what it is, right? Maybe it's just facilitating a few meetings, etc. So it all depends, how much do you have and what do you want to get, right? Funders often will provide it, but that's not a guarantee, right? You got to fight for that as well. I would say if you're going to go with a consultant, don't go with the first one that gets sent to you, right? Usually there's a board member who says, I got somebody for you. And then you kind of feel, excuse me, you feel compelled to go with that person because, well, my board member says this is the right person. Always interview. You want to interview 2 to 3. It doesn't have to be anything deep, it could be a 30-minute, ask them to bring examples of other plans that they have put together. I think that's the key. Say, what strategic plans have you worked on, and can you bring me copies of those and explain to me what it is about this strategic plan that you like. If they can't do this for you, or they say, well, that strategic plan is a top secret, they said I couldn't, well, that's probably not the consultant you want to go with. You want a transparent consultant that is really proud of the work that they've done. And by the way, a strategic plan should not be a top secret document. Most nonprofits should be readily, you should be able to share it. So that's what I would say here.
Okay. Orson, I have a comment in the chat.
Okay.
And this comment is from Deborah Vaughn. And I think this will probably resonate with a lot of people. But Deborah is saying that COVID impacted following, and it interrupted the plan. And it became more about survival.
Yeah.
And so I think that when we get to the hack, Deborah, that this will be very useful for you. So I'll just leave it at that and let you keep moving forward.
And if I'm hearing that correctly, that there was a plan, and then COVID hit, and our world has changed, and how do we kind of pivot back into a plan that and that was done pre-COVID, which was not that long ago, but in terms of the world we live in, it looks different. So that's that kind of what I'm hearing, Carmen.
Yes, and I would think, Deborah, and feel free to unmute yourself, Deborah Vaughn.
I'm unmuted. It's just
Okay.
we've had a strategic plan for many years, and it's been very useful for the board. We've had the entire organization, the people who work with us, the teachers, the families, the company members, to contribute to the plan and to understand what it is and why we need it. But it's just like when COVID hit, I don't know. I just felt like we were in survival mode. It's just like, okay, what can we do to keep this going? And so now we're at the point of, since we're coming out of COVID, reviewing the mission, the plan, the purpose, all of that. So I don't know. It's been a lot.
Yeah.
Yes.
It has been a lot.
It has been a lot. It's been a lot. But Orson, I'm going to encourage you to keep moving toward this hack, because it looks like everybody is saying the same thing as it relates to, well, what can we do? This is becoming very challenging given the times that we're in.
And this is everybody. This is nearly every nonprofit, nearly every corporation had to, just get into crisis mode during COVID. And now you're coming out, and now you're saying, well, what has changed in our plan, and what do we need to do differently? So that you're not alone. You're not alone.
Absolutely.
The stakeholder engagement process, again, is important. Takes a lot of time, but what I would imagine with all of you is that you're always engaging stakeholders, especially the community that you serve, right? And especially your staff. So this doesn't have to be a long out retreat. It can just be, it could be a staff meeting to say, what's working right now, what's not. Maybe it could be a quick survey. Like we just did a quick survey, Carmen, and if we sent those survey results to the San Francisco Foundation, maybe they'll create a new fund for strategic planning, because they're going to realize that, given the comment we just heard, that, folks are coming out in a changing world and need some support. And then I'll quickly go through these. There's the visualization, right, which is very important. I always say it's kind of like a math problem. If we do A and B, then we get C, right? If we show up to the community and provide amazing food assistance or amazing tutoring, then we're going to get, happier people, more educated children, more empowered families. You know, it's very simple, right? The theory, you know, people will call this the theory of change and show you all these logic models like you see in the graphic here. You know, you just look at them, they look confusing, right? Like I went to the web and put theory of change and look at these models. It's like, what is that? It looks like one of these like kids' playground toys where the marbles like moving around, like, you know, it's something for an engineer, you know, it's like most of us are not engineers. So, some consultants are not gonna like that, but I'll say, like, if you see something like that, like shove it aside. Like too much, too much. All right, we're gonna just go here with what I call the toes, but it's, you know, still using the threats, the opportunities, the weaknesses, and strengths. Here, it's very important to just be honest with yourself and making sure that there is trust, which also just takes a lot of work. I know from my experience, make sure there's trust within the organization, that employees feel empowered to be transparent about what they see, about what their views are, and that they can say things in a way where it's not going to come back to them in their evaluation or their check-in. Like this is a safe space, right? And so what I would say, kind of coming out of COVID, you know, you can, again, without a consultant, you know, it could just be you and your board. It could be you and your leadership team. Maybe it's just your department, right? Maybe your organization is not there yet, but you feel like your department needs to be grounded. Is, you know, spend that staff meeting going through a TOES analysis, right? And we're going to send all this these materials out. Carmen mentioned, so you can get this. So we've kind of, you know, hacked the process a little bit, because we imagine that many of you are dealing with some of these issues under threats or opportunities. Remember, threats and opportunities are external things that are happening, right? COVID was a huge threat to our community, but for a lot of nonprofits, COVID created huge opportunities for funding, right? We saw a lot of nonprofits get record amounts, and not all of them, right? But we did see, you know, a huge infusion of funding, state funding to our nonprofits.
Sorry to interrupt. Looks like we have a question. Is this a good time?
Yep, this is a good time. Go for it.
Vanessa Beek, I think it's pronounced, asked, but does having a simple logic model overlook the complexities that go into a theory of change?
I would say that there are a lot of complexities in the theory of change, and if your team fully understands the theory of change, then I would say go for it. What I would say is, from my experience, I see a lot of organizations get tripped up on the logic models and the theory of change. So I would, you know, I'm just giving you my preference, but there's so many models out there, right? You could do a theory of change, you could do goals and objectives. We're going to talk about objectives and key results, which I like, OKRs. I think I would say pick the one that works best for you. I will say that sometimes we make things a little, for the leadership, oftentimes we understand the complexities, but for new staff, for volunteers, sometimes they need to see something that is simple. That's what they remember the most, what they can get the most, and then you bring them up to the complex things. But that's a good point. And I think not every there's so many models. If you look at strategic planning, you're going to find SMART goals, or then somebody transitioned them to SMARTY goals, or then there was KIPS, then there's theory of change. There's so much. Find the one that works for you. I'm going to recommend one, and you'll decide whether that's the right one for you or not. Great question.
And I'd like to hop in here too, Vanessa. What I like about this, what we're calling a hack, is that even if you don't, whether you have a strategic plan or you do not have a strategic plan, you can still use this hack. But what this hack does is it looks at your situation from where you are. So as Orson has shown here, you can start by saying, we need a plan because these are the things that are threatening to our being able to do what we do. So you just start with that. And it's a conversation within your team. If these are the threats, what opportunities do we see? And I love the toes idea, Orson. What opportunities do you see for us to overcome those threats? Okay, what are the weaknesses that we're dealing with us for us to address this? But what are the strengths that we have as an organization? And this particular hack skips over all or most of those formal processes that can become very confusing. And it is a hack because it just says, let's have a discussion among ourselves and let's use the toes to describe where we are and explore where we can go. So I love this, what Orson is showing right now as the hack.
And so
Thanks, Orson.
And Carmen and I came up with, what are some things that you would probably see under each column? Some of you might see some of these and say, yeah, you might cross one out. But ideally, you would add more specifics, right? So if it's high real estate costs that's impacting you, or inflation, you can be specific about it, right? So if you provide food and your food costs are going up, be specific, right? We saw our food costs go up last year 10%, and funders aren't giving us that extra 10%. Or we see a decline in funding opportunities because 3 funders just left the field and told us that they're going to go do their own strategic plan, right? Who's heard that? Funder says, we're on hold because we're strategic planning, and they're out paying a consultant $100,000 a year. Meanwhile, you're doing some important work still. So I would say, look at these. The ones that don't resonate, you can cross them out. But ideally, you're going to add your own, and you're going to put more specifics, right? What are you seeing? But I'd be surprised if at least for 2 or 3 in these columns didn't apply to things you saw in your organization. And again, this is something that you see across the board in every organization, big or small, grassroots or grass tops or foundations. Even foundations with so much money and endowments are dealing with, the weaknesses that I see. No strategic plan, staff burnout, low morale. So these are all things that are really important. And if you can see them and prioritize them, it's going to lead to you creating some really strong goals and objectives.
Yeah. One other thing, Orson, in when you do it in these columns, and you look at these columns as topical columns, even when you see the fact that things have changed, when you see that when you came out of COVID, as Deborah Vaughn was saying, that it interrupted the plan. When you do this particular hack by looking at the threats, the opportunities, the weaknesses, and the strengths, then the only thing that will have changed with the hack in the hacked plan is that the threats are different now. And some of those threats were actually brought on by COVID, by what you went through with COVID. So does it change your process? Does it change your plan? No. What it does is it just adds more things to the threats column, but it will probably add more to the opportunities column as well, which makes your strategic plan more of a working document that can change with all of the crazy things that we are seeing now. It's not static. Things are not staying the same now. You might think you have it all together because you have a $20,000 strategic plan. But guess what? You need a plan that can change with the environment that you're in. So that's why Orson and I we're looking at this as a hack to that long drawn out, expensive process and how you could have more control over the planning and implementation.
Yeah, and one thing you're going to hear a lot from us, will be a broken record, is strategic plans change a lot, right? I work for as I said, a public corporation now, and despite all the millions in resources and in planning, our plans change all the time, and that's because the environment is changing all the time, right? We're a lender, so interest rates go up, and that really shakes up our business, because suddenly the money that we have to borrow has gotten way more expensive, right? Or we see recessions, before the government sees a recession, because we see people are struggling to pay a bill or being late on bills. So there's things that we see that move fast, right? That's not in a year. Sometimes it's in 3 months. And so it's the same everywhere.
Alicia added something in the chat also, and it looks like someone else did too. They said, yes, many funders are not receiving proposals because they are in the middle of strategic planning, and many funders are closing the doors to new NGOs and state that they are only renewing grants with current grantees.
That is something that is really sad, and something that I've been hearing about for 25 years and some of you probably longer in the nonprofit sector. So I would say this is unfortunate, but it's not a new development. It's not going to be an old development. You just gotta continue pushing through. One of the things I wish I was, and you have a whole fundraising arm to this, Carmen, but one of the things I wish I was more, did more when I was at Greenlight, I wish I was more persistent, because I'm in this world now, and I have vendors, I have people who probably don't want a grant from me, but they want me to buy a certain software package or system, and they will send me something once a month, right? And they'll have a catchy subject. Like, they don't give up. Like, hey, can I talk to you just for 5 minutes? Has anything changed? Like I think many of you, we all do that. But sometimes if a funder says, they're hoping we go away for a year, like, don't let them do that. Go away for 2 weeks and, keep a list, but it's really hard. But that's a whole funder conversation.
Right. That's
yeah,
true. The other thing is that and Norma has made a really good comment, and that is that funders are new funders are appearing as old ones disappear. The other thing is that we have talked a lot this year about diversifying the funding base. You don't just go to private foundations. Some of these organizations, like perhaps Orson's organization, may provide grants to somebody. We have corporations that do that. Corporations are always talking about social responsibility. And we talk about how you can get grants from them. You can get municipal grants. You can get federal grants. So don't fall into the trap of just looking at private foundations as your only funder. That go back and look at what we talked about. I think it was in our first session in February, or you could go online to A Model Built on Faith and look at the recording when we talked about diversifying your funding base. Because when you diversify your funding base, you're diversifying your ask to various types of funders, and they're not all the same. Orson, there's another question for you. It is from Sharon Avery Boone, and it says, is there an order, or should we have a strategic plan to develop our internal structure first before pursuing any funding for external sources? So should you do something internally first to, I guess, get your ducks in order? And Sharon, you can unmute yourself at any time. How you develop an efficient, capable internal structure to work together to carry out these goals. So are you there, Who was that? Oh, are you there, Sharon? Sharon Avery Booth.
Yes, I'm here.
Oh, hi, Sharon. Thank you for unmuting. Maybe you can ask Orson that question directly, because I'm sure I slaughtered it.
No, that's correct. Because the internal structure seems to be wavering. Like, how do you get that strong enough to be able to carry out goals that you might get funding for? I'm a pastor of a church, so just trying to get that together. It's been difficult. Do I need a plan? What kind of plan can I use internally, strategically, to build that, and then go for other funding and services?
And when you say internally, does that start with your staff and employees?
Yeah, with just with the board and the members and the congregation, just trying to get everybody on board.
Yeah.
And I'm struggling with getting a plan, how to figure out how to do that.
Well, I would say the plan starts with you, right? Someone has to start the plan. Now, this is a very difficult one, because I think this is where a lot of our organizations, it's tough to move forward because there's so many bricks to put together, right? Before you go, right? And I think for many of us, the passion and the love for our community is what gets us over the hump. But I would, I'd start having these conversations with, definitely start with the board, right? Whether it's a tolls analysis or some visualization of what do we see as our role in the community, and if we did what do we think is going to happen. So I would definitely start with the board, because it's going to be harder to do anything else with your members or with your staff if the board isn't kind of seeing eye to eye where you're going. And that's perhaps a whole nother conversation, right, Carmen?
I
board
agree.
Capacity.
I agree, but also, I do a lot of work with faith-based organizations, and I would even consider faith-based organizations to be my favorite area to work with. And that is because I believe that faith-based organizations have the greatest opportunity to make an impact and bring about change. So this was Sharon, right? Sharon, can you unmute yourself? Was that Sharon?
Yes.
Okay.
It was Sharon. Yes.
Okay, Sharon. So Sharon, here's one of the things that you can do if you want to do the strategic planning with a faith-based organization. The first thing I would do is to plan on having 3 planning sessions. The first one being with the community that you're serving. What is it that you're trying to accomplish in the community? What impact are you trying to make? Have a town hall or discussion group and write down their answers. Okay, those are the people you're serving.
Mm-hmm.
I would take it the next level up to the leadership. So you're looking at the young ministers who were there. You're looking at all of your committees. You're looking at the women's ministry. You're looking at the men's ministry. You're looking at the ministers who are teaching. And that would be the next level. And I would share what the community has said, so they would know what needs to be changed. Write all of this down. And then I would go to the third level and I would say, listen, board, this is what the people are saying. Now, what can we as an organization do about it? And if you tackle it from that perspective, first of all, who are we helping and what do they need? Next, listen, leaders, this is what people need. How are we going to respond? And third, okay, board, we've talked to everybody. And now, how can our organization move to reflect what's needed? So I would kind of do it the opposite way. I'd start with the little saying that some young people taught me, nothing about us without us. So talk to your community. I love that statement.
That's a great
So,
statement.
and I would be very happy, Sharon, to talk to you offline after the presentation. But I hope
Okay,
that
thank
helps.
you. Thank you.
Orson, we have a few more questions and comments that have built up in the chat since then. Do you want to answer any more now, or do you want to hold any for later? I can also save them.
I would say, let's make sure we come back to them. I see important comments about inflation,
I can make sure
costs going
that
up,
we save them and we can ask them later.
funders not being there. And I would say, how do we rise in power? It's through a strategic plan, and sometimes through a collective strategic plan, or a strategic plan that requires collaboration, right? But we can come back to. Can you remind me, Carmen, to come back to some of those?
Absolutely. I'm going to take down those names and we'll come back.
Great. Let me just quick piece on the mission and vision. You're going to find for many organizations, these were written a long time ago. Just changing the mission can take up to a year. So I would say, don't wait for a new mission for you to work on your goals and objectives, or what I'm going to call your objectives and key results. It's, if you think it's important, but it to me, this is one of the places where a lot of nonprofits get tripped up, especially your mission. That's something that the board should decide on. Visions are more flexible because oftentimes you don't really see visions in a bylaws or your articles of incorporation. But I would just say, don't let the imperfect hold you back, right? Don't, there's a lot of trainings out there that say, starts with your mission, and if your mission isn't perfect, then nothing else is gonna fall in place. I'll say, that mission and vision is in leadership. It's in the CEO, it's in the leadership team and the staff. So, if you want to do this, just be very careful, because it could take a very long time. And then you're really talking about a lot of staff time. Any quick thoughts on this one, Carmen? You're muted.
Sorry. I think the mission and the vision are your North Star. So regardless of whichever approach you take, when I have done strategic planning with folks, I've worked with some groups that they end up arguing a lot in the middle of the thing, and have worked with one organization that was supposed to be providing services to children. And the vision for that organization was that the kids, it's all about the kids, and to make the kids' lives better. So that's why the vision is so important, because if you want to stay on track with anything that you're going to do, everybody needs to be bought in with the vision, and everybody needs to keep their focus on the vision. If you're concerned about homeless people and you start getting off track of what your vision is about, providing homes, what I've done for organizations like that, I put 5 of their leadership in my SUV and drove them around to all the homeless encampments and said, do you remember what your vision is now? Can we get back to work and stop arguing and stop floundering, because people's lives are really at stake here. So the vision needs to be strong and non-changing. The mission sometimes has to change because there are things that are happening in our communities that are becoming very disturbing and require that we really impact them. But the vision you should never forget, and it's locked in. Does that answer the question? I don't know whose question that was, but I hope it answers.
Yep. Thank you. That was my question.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
So there's a lot of information, right? And I remember being where we were like, okay, we did a visioning exercise, we did a logic model, we did a TOES analysis, We did a, town hall with our coalition members. And then you're like, so what do we do all, like, how does this get into some goals and objectives, right? Like where do we go? And, I would say is avoid information overload, right? You're going to have a lot of information. Go back, as Carmen said, go back to that North Star. Once you've heard all of this, go back to that North Star, whether you got to go back into the community, take a drive, or, all that information is going to be, hopefully you've had a good note taker. But now you're ready to really just think of goals and objectives. And, when people talk about strategic plans, they're really just talking about what are your goals and what are going to be your key results. That is the meat, right? Like I see a lot of strategic plans that get published and they're like 20 pages long because the first 2 pages is about the history of the organization. And the next 5 pages are about our programs. And then they go to 1 page that has their goals and objectives. Like all I really wanted to know was what were their goals and objectives, right?
That's right.
So when people talk about strategic plan, it really is just your goals and objectives. That's all it is. So I like to use what I call, not only did we do a hack on the toes, but I like to use what I call grassroots objectives and key results. I'd love to know who out there, maybe people can raise their hand quickly, but who has heard of objectives and key results, or OKRs? I can't see the screens on this end, so maybe Carmen, you can tell me.
I don't see any hands
Okay.
up, and I think
right.
it's because people call them different things.
Got it.
And so,
problem.
oh, I
see a
do.
hand.
I see Marsha Jackson. Her hand is up. Anybody
Right.
else? Okay, let me see. I'm going to go to my next screen. Okay, so Marsha Jackson, but I think they call them different things.
Yep.
We look at objectives, we look at outcomes, and then the key results. Oh, and Lynette Lee, Orson, but I don't think that people speak in terms of the key results. I think this would be a good thing to really talk about.
Yeah, and to somebody's point earlier, right? There's different systems, there's different ways. I would say that this is kind of the new way that you're seeing across organizations, large or small. They're talking about OKRs. And here's why I like them, and maybe people will not like them for this reason, but most corporations, most foundations are using OKRs, right? And so when you can say to a funder or to, most funders got their money from corporate America in the first place, right? Foundations got their money because they invested in Nike or Pepsi or Tesla or Toyota or PG&E. Foundations are just, their money just comes from corporate branches, right? They invest it, they make a return. But all those corporations and foundations are using OKRs. And so when you're using OKRs and you're speaking their language, they are going to be, from what I've seen, impressed that you're talking about OKRs. And they're also going to recognize the simplicity by which they work and how effective that they can be. And so that's why I like OKRs. Again, there are different systems out there. There's the SMART goals, there's the key performance indicators, KPIs. And who knows, maybe in 10 years, I might not be talking about OKRs, but I'll be talking about them now because I really like them now. So an objective in an OKR is a measurable aspirational statement meant to inspire action. It's the where you want to go. And the key thing here is that it should be measurable, right? If you don't know how you're going to measure that, right? Like if your objective is, I just want to make the world a better place. Well, how are you going to measure that, right? And then there's so many ways that you can make the world a better place, right? It's by eliminating poverty, or it could be for you planting more trees, or making sure that more people are living healthy lifestyles. Well, now you're getting into something more measurable. Your key result is how you know you're going to get there. So your key result has to have a number, usually has to have a number. And it usually should be time bound, right? Whether it's in 3 months or 6 months. Most key results are a year because we all work on a fiscal calendar where we're looking at budgets and expenses in a year. So we're going to get into the grassroots OKR. See some other things that have come up in the chat. I don't see the chats on my end, but anything there, Carmen or Shad?
Yes, one of the things you may want to, or I could just clear it up now, because Deborah Baum was saying, are you saying, okay, artists? And no, we're talking about key results,
Key results,
objectives and key results. And then the other thing that I think we should just explain, just as a punctuation, that we're talking about when we say SMARTY goals, we've talked about the goals, but they should be strategic, they should be measurable, that's SM,
Yep.
ambitious, realistic, time-bound. It means it can be done in a specific period of time. But over the years, for those of you who've had my trainings, is that that they've been SMART goals, but now they're SMARTY goals. And SMARTY goals include, they are inclusive and they are equitable. So it just takes the regular SMART goals and it adds inclusive and equitable. Thanks, Orson.
Thank you for outlining the SMART and the SMARTY. I had forgotten what the SMARTY was because I had to use that. Thanks for reminding. I knew the E was for equity.
Inclusive and equitable.
Yeah, makes sense. Any other thoughts in the chat? We should.
Well, we're going to save some of them until the Q&A session.
Sounds good.
You're at 10:25 right now, so
Alrighty.
we'll have a little time to do that.
So just quickly, OKRs are the most powerful. They encourage collaboration. They clarify what's most important. They keep members from wanting to do everything. And here's my favorite one. It allows people to say no when passed down a line, right? When your supervisor or someone says, hey, like, we're going to do this. You're like, well, it's not in my plan. And you said, we agreed that we're going to do this plan this year. And if I achieve this plan, I would get a raise or a bonus. So if you want me to do something different, tell me what we're taking off, right? Tell me what's changed. But this is a good, it helps protect you as an employee. It helps you as a supervisor hold people accountable, and it prevents us from chasing so many things that suddenly then we've forgotten kind of where we're going. So I always like to list kind of, you can use a personal OKR. And so I'll share what my personal OKR is. Like sometimes, and sometimes you take this for granted, but sometimes I just want to feel healthy and happy, right? And I'll say that when my wife and I got married and we had 3 kids and the kids were little, right? One was 1, one was 3, one was 5. I remember I wasn't feeling healthy or happy, right? I was stressed, I was tired, I wasn't sleeping. And because of that, I wasn't doing the things that I enjoy and love, right? And it made me realize like, wow, like I'm coming to work and I don't feel good. I'm not my best self. And that's because I'm not working out, right? And for me, my workout that I've realized that just kind of helps me a lot, helps my asthma, helps everything, is yoga, right? So if I can go to yoga 15 times a month, I know I'm going to feel good, right? I know if I read a book once a month, I love to read, but sometimes I just forget, right? I love live music. And if I can hang out with my buddies and go to a live music venue, that's really important to me, that I see my friends. And then having dinner with my wife, at a new restaurant once a month, that's great for us to really kind of connect, go to a new place. And so these are, it's a very simple objective. It could be measurable, right? You can measure your health every time you go to a doctor, right? Whether it's your blood pressure or your cholesterol or your weight. You can track it easily, right? I could have thought of more than, I have 4 key results here. They say for each objective, you don't want to have more than 5 because then you're tracking too many things. I agree with that. Keep it less than 5. If you can keep it to 3 or 4, even better. And then always think about who is the primary driver, right? So for this one, it's up to me to make that happen. I can't blame anybody else on that, but I'm going to need collaboration, right? I have friends bolded and my wife bolded, they're going to have to be part of this plan somehow, right? They're going to, I wouldn't do this for my personal life, but if this was work, they'd have this on their plan as well. And they would have agreed to it in the strategic plan, because for me to meet my plan, I'm going to need them to collaborate. I'm going to need my wife to collaborate. So that's just a very simple way. Again, for some of you, this is overly simplistic. You're like way out there, but for what I see, for most of us just doing important work in the community, we need, especially when strategic plans fall off, we have something simple, which is just the goals and some key results. Then we'll move forward. I'll share another example. A lot of us really care about social media, right? And so I bet most organizations have a social media engagement goal, right? So you can create a social media engagement goal by increasing your posts by, maybe you're going to increase, maybe this is too ambitious. I just came up with a number, but you're going to, increase your posts by 100%. And you're going to decide what platform is important to you, right? Is it going to be Facebook? Is it going to be, I guess Twitter is now X? Is it going to be the new Threads on Facebook? Is it IG, TikTok? This is not a social media. That's a whole nother one, Carmen. But I'm sure you all have goals, because this is important, because this is everybody in your community. I bet, even whether they're young or old, they are on social media in some way, some fashion, and you want to be able to get through to them, right? And so you can list some key results, right? What are you going to do? Are you going to launch 15 total combined posts or stories per month? Are you going to increase your followers by, in each platform? So you can come up, and then suddenly you have a plan, right? When somebody says, oh, what is, goes to your communications team, goes to your CEO, what are you doing on social media? Well, we have a plan to increase their social media by 100%. And these are the 3 ways that we're doing it. If a funder asks you that question and you can answer it that succinctly, they're going to say, okay, that is great. Like, I see a clear vision, a clear plan. It's not just, we're going to do better. We need to do better on Facebook. We need to do better on social media. It's like, no, we have a very measurable, and we're a very focused organization that cares about results.
Yeah. Orson, one of the things I want to anticipate a question or something that could cause some confusion with the term key results. Because, and if I could just kind of restate it a little bit, you have your objective, and correct me if I'm wrong in how you've stated this, but so when you say key results, you're looking at what exactly is an indicator that you are meeting the
Yep.
objective. So if you were to use the word indicator, that you're on track with meeting that objective, that's what key results is saying.
That's correct. And that's, thanks for clarifying that confusion here, because I could see where that would be. Your result is your indicator, right? It's the result is, well, one, you have a goal, right? Your goal is you want to increase by 100%, right? That's your goal. That's your objective. Your result is the things that you're going to do, right? You're going to launch 15 posts or stories. You're going to increase followers. So yeah, definitely the results are the things that you have control over, right? You might not be able to guarantee that you're going to increase by 100%, but if you do your 15 combined posts, you're going to, that's what we're talking about. So that
Right.
The result is what you can control. And one of the things we can get to later is sometimes you might do all of these and you might not hit that 100%. That's when you have a conversation at the end of the quarter or at the end of the year to say, well, what else do we have to do? Right. But in the meantime, that, it's proven, if you do your research, it's proven that if you put more posts and good stories, it's going to lead to more followers. Right. So you're going to pick things that are well researched. You're not just going to do anything. You're going to say what your activity is going to be research based. right? Based on results. But very good point. Carmen.
Absolutely. Thank you.
And here's another, this is usually what it looks like. Somebody told me, there's so many templates out there and systems, but I always like to use just a simple Word doc. You could use an Excel sheet, a Google sheet. But at the end of the day, this is, there was you came to work every day and there was something on your screen that you saw or a piece of paper, this is something that you should look at every day, right? Say, okay, if I'm I'm sure the CEO cares about this, but also the development director cares about this. Like we said, we're going to increase our fundraising by 50% this year. And we said we're going to get our current funders to increase giving by 20%. We're going to meet with at least one new funder per month. We're going to submit 7 new proposals this year to new funders. Then now I know I got work to do. I'm like, okay, what do I have to do to meet with that new funder? How am I going to submit that new proposal? Then you have your KR, part of the background noise. You have your KR. That's the name of the individual. That's your driver. Who's your key result driver, right? And that's the person usually in charge of implementing the initiative. Usually it's your development director, but it's also a key driver is also the person overseeing that development director. So you'll have 2. And then, the status, you would update this every 3 months. You could put, this over these 3 months, we met with 3 new funders. We submitted 2 new proposals. There's different ways to do status. I think I like just a narrative, right? Type it in. What were your activities? Some people try to come up with a simple like 1, 2, 3, or 5, or 4 stars, or or a 1 means we've hit it out of the park, 0.7. I put a narratives here, right? We met with 3 funders this year, 4 funders this year, because usually at the end of the year, you're going to use this information for your evaluation to summarize what went well. And then you're going to move forward like that. Some people go further and will put this information into a software like a Coda or an Asana. And I would say if you can get there, more power to you. Those are great tools. That's a whole nother training. But putting some of this information into some of these management tools, Asana is one that gets used a lot. Then I think the better. It all depends, where your staff is, where your capacity is. So I'll stop there for now. Any thoughts, Carmen? Anything you're seeing in the chat? You're muted. You're muted, Carmen.
Yeah, this answers several of the questions, Orson, because folks have been looking at, okay, how do you build this out? And in terms of a template, just what you have shown right there, if you were to do this with each one of your objectives, you have your template. You have your strategic plan. And the only thing you need to wrap around it is all that other stuff that comes up front. This is perfect.
I'll say everybody needs one of these, right?
Yeah.
The CEO should have one of these. Every department head should have one of these. And then every employee should have one of these. But it starts at the top. Either the department head or the CEO should have one. And it should be transparent. You should be able to say, what is our CEO's OKRs? And then you have to make sure they're aligned, right? Everybody builds their plans so they're connected, right? If your CEO doesn't have a fundraising plan, but you do, then it's not going to work, right? You both got to be aligned.
Exactly. The thing I love about this, Orson, is the fact that when everybody has this, remember everybody, the session we had on getting boards to be active, that if the board has this and everybody else has it, then it really holds everybody from the board, CEO, everybody accountable, not only on being on the same page, but also being accountable to moving forward. And then and giving a status of where they or their team happens to be at any given time. So I see this as a really effective way in a simple way of moving an organization in the direction it needs to go. Thank you. I really like this.
And it creates just a very simple, let me go back to it. It's a very simple, also for all you managers out there. We know it's hard to manage these days. I think it's probably always been hard to manage, right, Carmen? But
Yeah.
now you have something where if you're the manager and your employee sees this, whoever is reporting to you, they know what they have to do. You're like, okay, did you have we submitted a new proposal? Can I see it? Did we meet with one new funder? Have you helped me find a new funder? What have you done to try to find a new funder? Let me help you. So it's just a good kind of grounding exercise. And then it just makes your management, it should be your check-in should be just so much easier, right? No surprises, right? Your supervisor's not saying, oh, you didn't do this. Well, you'd be like, well, it's not in the plan. You know, we didn't talk about it. So that's
You didn't tell me I needed to do this.
It helps you manage up and it helps you manage
Yeah.
down. And managing up is a big part of the process because supervisors are, you know, busy, maybe didn't get good management trainings because in the nonprofit sector, we don't get good training as it is oftentimes, unless you're part of the Faith Initiative and you've been lucky to be on Carmen's programs. But it's the truth.
But it's true. I think that this is so helpful because I think that a lot of times we are so busy in the nonprofit world with so many things pressing us, and we're driven by the heart. You know, we're driven by the heart, but we got to remember that we also have to be driven by the plan. And
yeah, and I would
sometimes
say,
it's one or the other, and we do so many things that end up being just sort of seat of the pants. You know, we're just trying to do what we need to do because we see these things happening in our community. So having a plan is amazing.
and if you want to champion a plan, start with a plan for yourself. Like just think of your own plan. Whatever it is, whatever goal you have of the year, create a plan and then stick to it. And then you're going to create the mindset of sticking to a plan, checking, revising it. You know, maybe you got tired, you know, maybe one day I'll get tired of reading books and want to do something else. But the more you put your mindset on sticking to the plan, looking at it, revising it, it takes some practice. And then, you know, I'll give you some other kind of sample objectives that are very, very common in the nonprofit community, right? We already talked about fundraising, but maybe it's increasing your volunteer engagement, reducing employee turnover, driving an advocacy agenda, delivering better quality programs, excuse me, that average, you know, some organizations, you know, survey their clients, some not, but maybe, you know, it's like every time I get off an Uber, I get a simple 5-star thing. It's like, how'd you like this experience? And, you know, sometimes just 5 stars, maybe we could do the same thing for the people we serve, right? It could be, they don't have to fill out a 2-page survey. You know, it's like, just give us a quick star, or that, you know, that happy button you see sometimes when you come out of your hair salon. That stuff goes a long way. Here are some quick tips. Less is better, you know, and for some of you probably have some very thorough strategic plans and it's working for you. For a lot of you, and I'm included, less is better, right? Don't have too many objectives. Too many objectives distract us. Make sure, as I mentioned earlier, these are measurable. For this to work, really the leadership team has to adopt this, right? Otherwise, but I have seen some places where perhaps the leadership team or the CEO wasn't there yet, but there was a program person, program head of whatever department. They said, well, I'm going to do it for my department. And then they other departments were like, hey, how did you do that? We're jealous. I wish I had a plan. You're like, well, let me show you, and as long as CEO and everybody else is on board, and but I used to have that happen to me at Greenlining, where I'd have a rock star supervisor, and I'd be like, whoa, that's a really good plan that you created, and they did it on their own. I get jealous. Make your objectives transparent, right? You should be able to show them to people, show them to all the departments. Everyone should be able to have them, whether it's a document, a live, or whether you have some kind of intranet system. Don't forget, these are living and breathing. It's okay if you check in and the world has changed and you need to revise, you need to delete, you need to add. Just remember to not add too many. Less is better. You still are only one person. You can't work more than, many of us are already working evenings, weekends. You can't do more, because then you're just going to burn yourself out, right? You got to be realistic. And at the end of the day, making sure that you're happy and healthy, because if you're not happy and healthy, it's going to be hard for your organization to be happy and healthy. It's going to be hard for your clients to be happy and healthy. Very easy one, but this one actually gets overlooked, is who's in charge of that one, right? Sometimes a team will come up with a good objective, and then they're like, well, we have nobody to be in charge of that one, because either the organization's too thin, doesn't have funding. Don't either find the right person, or just put it in that playground, and hopefully you can come back to it later when you want to do it, or go to a funder and say, hey, through our process or through our community listening sessions, this is what we really heard, and this is where we want to go on this issue. But it's going to happen. Again, on your key results, don't do more than 5 per objective. You're going to get bogged down in data. Only add it if you can measure them. And I was I'm on a board where they had just gone through strategic planning process, and they got really into it and went really deep, right? Because sometimes it takes a lot to create healthy communities, healthy villages, and we're dealing in very complex systems. And so they wanted to measure all these things where they didn't have the capacity. They probably would have had to hire a professor or some PhDs to come in and create a new evaluation tool. And I was like, that's fine and dandy, but now we're going to spend $300,000 on evaluation. Like that, I could see why you wanted to get there. But what I would say, especially if you're more of grassroots, smaller, you want to keep things simple, is if you don't know if you can't measure it, then don't put it in the key result. Don't put it in. Be as specific. Again, track them. And again, it could just be going back to, the simple sheet. You can go deeper into this. Some people, if I look at my company's OKR, we probably have like 20 columns. It's so confusing, right? They have status bars and all kinds of things. And for a big corporation, I'm looking, people are not updating it because it's too much. It's like, keep it simple, come back to your plan. And over time, you'll come up with the ways to kind of evolve this as we go. You had asked about systems. What's the system? I shared the system. Again, you could go deeper and create a optimization tool in Asana and Asana. Coda is the new one, but you don't have to. You don't have to, unless your organization truly has the capacity to build those systems and make sure that someone's teaching everybody how to do them. If you want to go far deeper into this, the leading book on OKRs is Measure What Matters. I did some of this. I really love the Mark Friedman book, Trying Hard Is Not Good Enough, which is going to really get you to really drive those key results. And then, you got the longer book, the strategic planning book for nonprofits, which is also a really great book. So there's some really great resources out there. I'd say my favorite is the trying hard is not good enough. I remember the San Francisco Foundation was giving these away for free at some time. So they still are. Go get your hands on one of those.
I'm going to buy all 3 on Amazon.
Yeah, have the San Francisco Foundation give them to you.
Oh, that's true, huh?
They might have.
Let's try to get a bunch of them.
Yep, exactly.
Okay, since Michelle, I don't think Michelle's on the line, so she won't be expecting me to come at her with that, so.
So I see we are at 10, 11 minutes till. Carmen, lead us the way.
Okay, so we were saving some questions, and Shy has been, are you there, Shy?
Yeah, here.
Can you give us a couple of the questions? And the questions I want you to choose are the ones that you feel sort of based on what you see in the chat would cover a lot of folks. Would be a question that several people may have, or an important question.
I'm not sure if this has been answered at all, but Deborah Vaughn said, this was from a while ago, but it said, what can we do because funding is becoming low and expenses are high? Rentals for space, venues, and places where we feel like we belong. How can we engage with funders to support nonprofits and artists, and particularly the arts community? How do we make them hear us?
Well, I think that goes back to what we were talking about before, and that is diversifying your funding base. You can't go to the same sources. You have to get really creative with your sources. Was this Chiquita's? Whose question was this?
No, that was
Deborah Vaughn. Deborah Vaughn.
Yeah.
Yeah, Deborah, you want to unmute yourself and
Yes, I'm just looking at what is happening with the state, what is happening with our county, what is happening with our city. They all are, have budget shortages. And I understand that means engaging our communities to go beyond the funders that we have. And I was just wondering, do you have any other suggestions as to, who those funders will be, other than the, who are already supporting us? One of the things that I see and asking about how can we continue to advocate, because that seems as though what is needed to bring about more resources for the arts. And one of the things that I'm seeing just over the lifetime of our organization is how powerful the arts organizations are, but they are usually the first organizations to be cut.
absolutely.
Yep.
Absolutely. So Orson, I'm going to take a quick stab at this because it's kind of local. But Deborah, I think that one of the things that would be very helpful to you is if you could go back to the training we did on online funding research. Did you happen to attend that one?
I don't think I did.
Okay, because that is a very, and it should be Shy, is that one on the website?
Yeah.
Okay. I would suggest that you go back to that, because what that training does is it takes you through a process of going online through the library system and looking at a wide variety of organizations that fund very specific things. And of course, arts is one of those. And at the end of that search process, you could come up with 20 organizations that you probably haven't thought of as being a potential funder. The problem is when we go to the same people to fund. It's like metal fatigue on a funder. At some point it breaks, it's not useful to you anymore. But if you go through that process, please go online and look at the funding research strategies. It's really, really good. And it teaches you in a very specific way how to do that research. And then Deborah, then you can I'll put my email address, or Shai, you can put my email address in the chat, and then Deborah, you can contact me and we can talk a little further on that.
Okay, that would be helpful. Thank you.
Uh-huh.
I'm also hearing a lot of need for advocacy, right, Deborah and
Yes.
Carmen? And
Yes.
when I was at Greenlining, we started a small movement where we were pressuring funders to give to people of color-led organizations. And we convinced a group of legislators to propose a bill that would have required all funders in California to disclose their grants to people of led organizations. And it created such a national dialogue, like it was in the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal. You had members of Congress talking about it. We had the Black Caucus in Pennsylvania fly us out and give them a presentation because they wanted to do something similar in their state. We had legislators in Florida. It became this, and it led to some big pockets of funding going to people of color-led organizations. And so I know you do advocacy already, but what does the campaign look like where different arts organizations are pressuring funders to we're watching you, and if you cut that arts line item, you're going to see some really bad murals talking about you, or you're going to see some really bad artwork calling you out. Nobody wants that. So that's the advocacy training, which you can probably do better than me. But
We miss you. We miss you so much. We need you, Orson. Come back to the Bay Area.
all right, let me ask.
Well, thank you so much. We've run out of time. And the reason I say that is because we still have to do our evaluation, and we want to do a very brief announcement of our next training. But first of all, will you all please join me in thanking Orson Aguilar? Thank you.